meeting will please come to order. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Wilmette. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. As I said, this is a regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Wilmette. We will call the matters in the order in which they appear on the printed agenda, and there are copies of the agenda on the table by the door. You may want to have one so you can follow along to see when your matter will be called. If you plan to address us tonight, we ask you please come up to the podium, please speak into the microphone and tell us who you are and where you live, as that may be relevant to the matter at hand. We ask that you speak clearly in the microphone so we can hear you, and because everything you say and everything we say is being recorded. And from those recordings, minutes of the meeting are prepared, and these minutes are available at Village Hall and on our website at wilmette.com. Also, our Village Board meetings are televised on Local Access Channel 6 and on the Internet. If you look up, you can actually see the cameras. By televising our meetings, we make it easy for our neighbors in the community to follow the proceedings of the Village Board, to see the types of matters that come before us, the questions that we ask, and the policies we create. You can find archived videos of Village Board and other local government meetings at wilmette.com. And I'd like to personally thank all the residents of Wilmette who regularly tune in to Channel 6 to follow the workings of their local government. Now, before each meeting, the board receives a packet of agenda materials, and these materials are also posted on wilmette.com on the Friday before our meeting, so that residents and other interested parties can review the very same materials that the board members receive. This week's packet contained 138 pages. We've had an opportunity to review the information in the agenda packet, so if you do plan to address us tonight, we ask that you tell us the most relevant, most material, and the most important points you really want us to focus on. Finally, we are a community of neighbors, and as such, we want our meetings to be as civil and courteous as possible. So as a courtesy to those around you, please take this time to turn your cell phones and other devices off. And while we're turning off our phones, would the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Sullivan?
Here.
Trustee Kennedy?
Here.
Trustee Dodd?
Here.
Trustee Kurzman?
Here.
Trustee Barrow?
Here.
Trustee Plunkett?
Here.
President Belinsky?
Here. So we're all here, so we obviously have a quorum. Next item on the agenda is item 2, public comment. During public comment, individuals are allotted up to 3 minutes to address the board on an item which is not on the agenda tonight. Members of the audience may address the board on matters which are on the agenda when that particular matter is called. So is there any member of the audience who would like to address the board on an item which is not on the agenda? May I see a show of hands? Okay, moving on. Item 3 is the consent agenda. As described on the printed agenda, items which are routine business that are not normally debated by the village board are placed on the consent agenda. All items that begin with the number 3 are on the consent agenda, so tonight that means starting on page 1 with item 3.1, it's all that item, and all the items on page 2, ending with item 3.10. Items on the consent agenda are up for approval tonight. And if an item is not removed by a member of the audience and is not removed by one of the trustees, the item will be approved and it will not be discussed. So I'll begin by asking, is there any member of the audience who would like to remove an item from the consent agenda? May I see a show of hands? I'm moving on. Are there any items that any of the trustees would like to remove from the consent agenda? Okay, hearing none, may I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Would the clerk please call the roll on the motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Trustee Sullivan?
Aye.
Trustee Kennedy?
Aye.
Trustee Dodd?
Aye.
Trustee Kurzman?
Aye.
Trustee Barrow?
Aye.
Trustee Plunkett?
Aye.
President Belinsky?
Aye. So the motion carries. The consent agenda has been adopted. If you're here for an item on the consent agenda, it was just approved. And I'll clarify for people who are here tonight. Again, all the items beginning with number 3 have been approved, and that includes item land use committee items 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4. So if you're here for one of those items, it was just approved. There'll be no further discussion of those items or any of the other items on the consent agenda, so you are free to leave. But of course, you're more than welcome to stay, and we will be having a discussion of the budget. Budget's always fun conversation. I don't see anybody leaving, but in case you sneak out when I look away, it is early, so please stop by one of our restaurants downtown before you go home. And as an incentive, there are these $5 coupons sitting on the table, good only for tonight. So. And accepted by a number of our downtown restaurants. Moving on to report of officers, next item is proclamation designated October 24th, 2019 as World Polio Day. And I don't have a hard copy of that, so I have to pull that up. Okay. So the proclamation reads as follows. Whereas the Rotary Club of Wilmette and the Rotary Club of Wilmette Harbor are members of Rotary International, the world's first and still one of its largest nonprofit service organizations, founded in Chicago, Illinois in 1905. And whereas the Rotary motto, service above self, inspires members to provide humanitarian service, encourage high ethical standards, and promote goodwill and peace in the world. And whereas Rotary in 1985 launched Polio Plus and spearheaded the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, which today includes the World Health Organization, U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, UNICEF, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to immunize all the children of the world against polio. And whereas polio cases have dropped by over 99.9% since 1988, and the world now stands on the threshold of eradicating this dread disease and thereby eliminating the threat of polio-caused paralysis to every child in the world. And whereas members of the Rotary Club of Wilmette and the Rotary Club of Wilmette Harbor continue to contribute their time and their resources to support Polio Plus and the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, and whereas their efforts are providing much-needed operational support, medical personnel, laboratory equipment, and education materials for health workers and parents, therefore I, Robert T. Belinsky, President of the Village of Wilmette, do hereby proclaim October 24, 2019 as World Polio Day in Wilmette, and do hereby encourage all residents to join the Rotarians of our local Rotary clubs in the fight for a polio-free world. Next report is from our village manager, Mr. Frenzer.
No report, Mr. President.
Next report is from our Corporation Counsel, Mr. Stein.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Next up is item 5, the report of the Liquor Control Commissioner. There's no report tonight, so we will move on to item 6, which is the standing committee reports. First up is the Land Use Committee, Trustee Barrow.
All items on the consent agenda.
Next up is the Finance Committee, Trustee Kennedy.
I'd like to ask the staff to present the 2020 proposed budget.
Okay, this is I'll just, one quick introduction. This is sort of the first formal board-level action on the budget. We've had a lot of informal actions. We've had a lot of information being shared, but this sort of kicks off the formal process with the staff actually presenting the 2020 budget as required by the village's ordinance. So I'll turn it over, I don't know if I'm turning it over to Tim or to Mike. Or to Melinda.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you said, this is the evening where, under our village ordinances, we present for the first time the proposed 2020 budget. So on behalf of the village staff, I am pleased to submit for your review and consideration the proposed 2020 village budget, covering our fiscal year from January 1st, 2020 to December 31st. Okay. There we go. The 2020 budget is a reflection of the village's good governance and our solid financial planning, which includes our maintenance of our AAA bond rating upgraded to stable, our consistently meeting our actuarially required pension contributions, our public safety pension fund policy, which the board has voted to amend so that we can level off our future contributions, our reduced staffing levels while maintaining our core services, and our balanced operating budget while we're fortifying reserves over the previous years. We've also worked to limit and avoid fee and tax increases. Our sewer fee will propose a modest 4% increase, which is be the first since 2015. The water rate has not increased for 6 of the last 8 years and is not anticipated to increase in 2020. And as well, vehicle licenses, building permits, ambulance fees, and other fees have been held flat and will be held flat. They have been held flat for 6 years. Our general fund operating budget that you'll receive this evening is balanced. It maintains village services, and at the staff's recommendation, will propose an additional $500,000 to support the road infrastructure program. Our proposed budget that you're being presented tonight will enhance our investment in our core engineering functions with more dollars in total dedicated to road resurfacing, $5.3 million than any time in the last 20 years. We are recommending $2.75 million for the annual road program, which will increase the number of blocks resurfaced to 28, $1.2 million of reconstruction for Central Avenue, and $1.3 million for road resurfacing that will be associated with the neighborhood storage storm sewer program in Phase 1A. It will meet our goals to complete the repairs of all the serious and very poor alleys in 2020, as the board had previously requested. It'll maintain and enhance funding for sidewalks, curbs, brick street maintenance, pavement marking, and crack sealing, and will provide new annual funding for street patching after the success of the pilot program that we did this year. It'll also provide for Skokie Valley Trail and Skokie and Lake intersection improvements to be funded through our general fund reserves. We know that the board was concerned about the projected property tax levy that we were discussing in previous meetings. The budget that we're presenting to you, I'm pleased to say, projects only a 1.43% increase to the tax levy attributable to operations. That includes our normal street and road program, 0.75% for pensions, a very slight increase in debt service for a total increase in the property tax levy of 2.3%. If you recall, the 2.75% that was in last year's budget was the smallest property tax, or smallest percentage increase in the property tax levy, in 22 years. This one is projected to be lower. In that context, we are recommending to the board to add approximately $500,000 to the budget to supplement the road program. This would, $500,000 represents an additional 2.69%, which would be totally for the road program. It would increase, if adopted, would increase the percentage increase of property tax levy to 4.99. In the water fund, we are projecting no increase in the water rate, and the water fund continues to reduce the village's reliance on property taxes with $1.05 million budgeted to be transferred to the general fund. The transfer is increased by $50,000 in recognition of next summer's beginning of service for North Main Utilities, which will begin receiving wholesale water no later than July. The budget also includes $5 million for completion of the water plant electrical improvements. Other improvements will include $2.9 million for water main replacements on Central and Lake Avenues, $88,000 for valve installations, $40,000 for the rebuild of the water plant high lift pump, $21,000 for transmission main repairs, and $12,000 for water main surge suppressors. So without an increase in the water rate, the village is doing a good job in investing in infrastructure to support our water utility. For the sewer fund, we are projecting a modest 4% increase. This will affect residents by approximately, on average, $13 per year. We are mindful of the new stormwater utility fee implemented effective January 1st of 2020. We estimate the average annual fee is $144 per resident. The proposed sewer fund budget will also include the $23,200,000 for Phase 1A and 1 of the neighborhood storage improvements, as well as $820,000 for sewer lining, $400,000 for the stormwater pumping station and its electrical improvements, $337,000 for sewer main repairs, $322,000 for sewer maintenance, $70,000 to support what's proven to be a very popular Rain Ready program, and $60,000 for continued smoke testing, which we use to try to eliminate cross connections to our sewers and infiltration to the sanitary sewer. The board is, of course, concerned about the impact of all these decisions on residents. The property tax increase without the additional road program would be about $40 per, per resident. Is that the right?
Is that per resident or per household?
No, wait.
Excuse me. Got the wrong slide.
It should be $50 and $40. $40 for 2.3% and $50 for 2.7%. This was our old presentation slide that didn't get updated.
Is the one in the budgets correct?
We're just
Or-
supposed to
The ones in
flip
front of the
two
board.
numbers.
The ones that you have in your budget binder are correct.
And
The one that was emailed out.
The one that was emailed is
and that was
correct.
in the
We
good reader.
accidentally inserted the
The numbers.
wrong slide.
Our mistake, so I
So,
apologize.
And Tim, may I ask, the $40 does not include the additional $500,000?
that's right. The
50 below.
Yeah, the 50 below would be the additional for a total of 90 would be if we did the extra $500,000. Basically, the 2.69% is what $500,000 costs in the tax levy. It's about 2.7% for each $500,000.
And again, is that household or resident?
Oh, so this is.
That's the right slide up there. Thank you, John.
It's per household.
Household?
Per house.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Could Peter repeat his question? Could Trustee Barrow repeat his question? I was looking at something while that answer was there.
My question was whether the $40 figure included the additional $500,000, and that appears in the $50
Right.
right
The
below.
$50 is included.
Right.
Okay.
The,
Thank you.
at 2.3%, it would be about $40. Rule of thumb is every $500,000 in the budget is about 2.7% of the tax levy, each $500,000 increase. So that would be an additional $50 to total, a subtotal of $90. The water rate we're projecting is no increase, sewer $13, and stormwater fee would be $144, which, again, that 285 number is incorrect.
It's 247.
Very sorry about that. 247, which should be, again, in what was mailed to you, would be the...
Yes, it says 247 on the slides that were sent to us, and that was in a good reader.
So I apologize for the...
My apologies. We were putting the slide together today and rushing, so that was my mistake. I'll take responsibility for that. We'll have it corrected for our October 17th meeting, but it's better than it was at our last meeting, which is good, as we've driven down that general operating portion as low as we can.
Yeah, I mean, 1.43% back on slide 4 is a pretty good number, considering overall inflation levels and union contracts and raises and steps and all the other stuff that we have to deal with. We are fundamentally a people organization, and so salaries and benefits are a big chunk of it, so that looks like a pretty good number to
Our
me.
union contract will provide, on the police side, I believe, provides for 2.25 next year. So to bring it, and then with steps or whatever, it's about a 2.5% on that. So to bring the entire operation in at less than 1.5% increase is pretty, we'd like to think is pretty good. And we'll have opportunities to explain to you more the various cost savings that we have built into the budget. Our next steps will begin with the budget workshop on October 17th, at which point we can explore this with you in more detail. And as I think our prior discussions have indicated, the roads will be the primary capital item. There's just not a lot of other discretionary capital. The sewer, the West Side stormwater project is pretty much set. So roads are the main variable. Between now and the 17th, we also, again, this year would like to, and I'll send an email out to you to that effect this evening, we'd like to invite each of the board members to come, if you would like to, at your convenience, to meet with the budget team individually. It's been very helpful to us to do that, and I think the board members who have done that in the past have found it helpful as well. You get unlimited, uninterrupted time to ask us anything you want to, and we'll do our best to answer it. And it helps us focus what the concerns of board members are, so that on the 17th, we have a more efficient discussion. If necessary, we have a reserve date of October 29th. The budget ordinance will need to be introduced at least at the first meeting in November, so that we can adopt that and then introduce the tax levy ordinance in the second meeting in November. It has to be adopted in December, so that it can be on file with the county clerk before the end of the calendar year. So that's our schedule going forward. We thank you for all of the input and guidance that you've given us to help to refine the draft budget to this point, and we're looking forward to discussing it with you in more detail. We think as we conclude the road discussion with you, it's a very good story that we'll be able to tell the residents in terms of holding down the rate of increase in the tax levy. And I think it's fair to say the only times the tax levy has ever gone above, increase has been above 4% in the last 8 years, has only been twice, and it's only been for roads, to dedicate new revenue for roads. So I think the staff will be pleased to show you the cost management that we've brought to bring the basic levy in at a very low level, and what that frees us up to be able to do on roads going forward. And again, please feel free to let us know when it might be convenient, if you'd like to sit down and talk to us in advance of the 17th, and we will make ourselves available.
So-
The budget is online now,
Yeah, so you
available
don't-
to residents as well.
If you want to print it out at home, it's this big, so just for reference, line item, lots of, line item detail here, and it's all available online for anybody who's interested. And, I would suggest to the trustees that they avail themselves to taking time to meet with staff. Even if you've been through the process before, it's good to walk through your questions with the staff. And then on the 17th, that's when we sort of get into it, and there'll be a presentation, but the majority of the meeting will be for us talking about the policy questions that are in front of us. There aren't a lot of discretionary areas here, but obviously roads are an important one. And to the extent there are other topics that you want to make sure we cover, when you meet with the staff or just by emailing them saying, look, I want to make sure we talk about this, or this, they will talk about whatever we want to talk about. And it's really in that meeting where we get into the policy discussion. So for those of you who are undergoing or participating in your first budget, welcome. Hop on in, the pool is warm. But for those of us who've been through this a number of times, it's there's a lot of work that goes in it, and when you dig in and realize how much time the staff spends on this, I think you appreciate the work that they've done. So, anything else from the staff?
No, sir.
This isn't really intended to be like a conversation. You have the materials now, and we'll dig in, and I look forward to discussing it with everyone on the 17th.
The last meeting, we talked about getting additional data about the road program. Is that in this binder, or is it still forthcoming?
There is some additional data in the management letter, which is the transmittal letter, which is the first item in there. There's additional, based on the recommendation, we'd like to prepare some more in terms of the charts that we've been using to show the effect on the roads over time. We had a little problem getting those ready due to an illness on the staff this week, but we want to have that out to you as soon as possible, and certainly it'll be ready for you on the 17th when we're going through it all.
Thank you.
I have actually two things. One, I just want to acknowledge that I had made a request to have the Tuesday, October 29th meeting start at 7:30, but actually, if other trustees would prefer to start it at 7, that would be okay with me. So I just wanted to acknowledge that was my request. I know it was originally, and it turns out my schedule has changed, so if that would be better, I just wanted.
So is 7 o'clock okay
7 o'clock
now?
is fine.
Do we want to move it back to 7? Just, okay, so can we move that back to 7? Have we noticed anything or anything?
So I wanted, okay, so I'm sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
I just was my schedule.
Fine.
And then the second thing was just building on Trustee Kennedy's question. So there's a couple things in here where the numbers might have changed from what we saw like in the past packet, like, for example, the proposed levy, when we were talking about roads, was at like 4.9%, now it's different. Is there something in this packet that would help us see when the numbers are changing, when the numbers might have changed, kind of why, so we just understand, as opposed, I don't know how to dig into the details.
Sure.
Is that something that's in here?
I think
Or something we should address with you guys one-on-one?
transmittal letter at the beginning will explain where we moved some things around
Got it.
to be able to accomplish that without raising the tax levy so much. Part of it has to deal with the fact that the board had set the goal of finishing all the failed what we used to call failed, and now we're going to call it something else, but the failed alleys were all supposed to be done this year. We only have to do 2 instead of 4
Okay, perfect.
to get there. So that frees up some additional money for the streets. We kind of spent double on one of the brick streets last year, Prairie, because it was so long. So we're kind of giving a little bit of a hiatus to that. And that'll all be laid out in the transmittal letter that's
Thank
there. And that'll be when we get into the real substance of it on the 17th, or when we meet with each of you. We can
Yeah, and actually, as a
plow
side
through
comment
those.
regarding the transmittal letter, for residents who are interested in, like, really understanding the budget and village operations, a transmittal letter is a great place to start. It's not a two-pager. It's got some heft, but for those people who are watching who may be interested, it's a really good place to understand what we do here at the village.
The letter is kind of a roadmap as to each of the funds and what the changes have been since we've discussed it. We take our input from the board in terms of the reaction to the prior tax numbers that were being suggested as possible. We know that you wanted to see a lower number. So we'll be explaining, and then, of course, the letter explains in more detail what the steps we took were to either defer some expenses or to reallocate so that we can hit the numbers to put the road program in a good position without having to hit the tax levy as hard.
Okay. Trustee Kennedy? That's it for you, right?
Everything else is on the consent agenda.
Okay. Trustee Dodd, the Administration Committee?
All items on consent.
Trustee Sullivan, Municipal Services?
All items approved on consent.
Public Safety, Trustee Kurzman.
No report.
Trustee Plunkett, Judiciary.
All items on consent.
Item 6-7 is reports from special committees. There are no reports from our special committees. Item 7 is new business. There's no additional new business to discuss. Item 8 is adjournment. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? We stand adjourned at 7:50.